To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. Hello, I'm Joe Roberts, and this is the Mayfield Friday Time. I've been reading from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8.
Well, we want to welcome you again back to our Mayfield Friday Time. I'm Joe Roberts, and my co-host, Pastor Bernie Dixon, is here. Our technician and producer, Jamie Roberts, is back there on the board, getting everything technically correct and keeping us going. We wouldn't be able to do this program without him. We have Brother John Scott Raish on Skype with us. And then at the top of the hour at 7, we'll be bringing on Pastor Dan Curtis, pastor of the Community Missionary Baptist Church in Ashland City, Tennessee. He is also our guest, one of our guest co-hosts. So right now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Bernie to let him give us an overview of what we can see and expect on here at Mayfield Drive anyway on Sunday morning, brother.
Well, I'm continuing our study of we as people are Baptists and what it means. Last week I dealt with the subject of salvation. I believe no baptism. I dealt with baptism. I think we'll be going into the book of into the area of the Lord's Supper. So just keep your eyes and ears tuned, and just be ready for Sunday. So anyway, brother.
All right. And last Sunday, you carried that on into Sunday evening as well.
Oh, yes, I did too. It's a hard subject to cover whenever you've got so much to cover. So
yeah, that's very true. All right. Well, I want to start off with a subject has been in the international news, I'm sure, this last week, and that is the earthquake in Alaska. As we all know, there was an 8.2 earthquake, magnitude of 8.2 earthquake in the waters off of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. But I want to read Matthew chapter 24 and verse 6 through 8 first. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginnings of sorrow. So Alaska's great escape from the largest U.S. earthquake in 50 years. Thousands evacuate coastal areas after 8.2 magnitude offshore quake triggered tsunami warnings. Also, the shallow 8.2 magnitude earthquake hit 56 miles southeast of the town of Perryville in Alaska. It marked the largest in the U.S. in over 50 years, as Alaska was hit by a 9.2 magnitude earthquake in March in 1964 that led to the deaths of 250 people. The U.S. government issued a tsunami warning for Alaska's southeast coast. Perryville is a small village 500 miles from Anchorage, Alaska's biggest city. Alaska is along the Earth seismically, and I didn't pronounce that right. I get my tongue tangled up. Active Pacific Ring of Fire, and we'll be talking about that in just a bit. Hawaiian authorities later canceled a tsunami warning for the state. So as we continue, those were the headlines of this particular article. Thousands were forced to flee coastal areas after an 8.2 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Alaska, marking the largest in the U.S. in 50 years, and triggered tsunami warnings that were canceled 3 hours later. The shallow quake hit 56 miles southeast of the town of Perryville, the United States Geological Service said, with a tsunami warning in effect for South Alaska and the Alaskan Peninsula. Patrick Mayer, the superintendent of schools for the Aleutians East Borough in Sandpoint, told the Anchorage Daily News that he was sitting in his kitchen when it started to shake uncontrollably and caused the doors of his pantry and fridge to swing open and empty their contents. It started to go and just didn't stop, he said. It went on for a long time, and there were several aftershocks too. The pantry is empty all over the floor. The fridge is empty all over the floor. That must have been a mess he had to clean up. King Cove School Principal Paul Barker lives about a half a mile from the school and told the Anchorage Daily News that he immediately started taking pictures off the walls and moving belongings away from the edges of counters and tables. Everything in my house was shaking, he said. It wasn't that violent. I expected it to get harder and shake more, but it was just kind of a steady shaking for about a minute or so. The U.S. government's National Tsunami Warning Center immediately issued an alert for South Alaska and the Alaskan Peninsula, but canceled all warnings about 3 hours later. The maximum wave height detected by the center was 8 inches above the tide level, with small tsunamis hitting at least 6 points off along Alaska's coastline. Locals living close to sea level were told to evacuate to higher ground. The King Cove School Gymnasium is on higher ground and was used as a community evacuation point while the area was on the tsunami warning. Within 30 minutes, the school took in 300 to 400 workers from the nearby fish cannery, according to the Anchorage Daily News. We're used to this, Barker said. This is pretty normal for this area to get these kind of quakes. And when the tsunami sirens go off, it's just something we do. It's not something you ever get used to, but it's part of the job living here and being part of the community. This is the largest, or small waves hit the coast of Kodiak, according to a broadcaster on local radio station KMXT. She said authorities lifted evacuation orders with no reports of any damage. This is the largest earthquake to happen in the Alaska region since 1965. Michael West, A state seismologist with the Alaska Earthquake Center told Alaska Public Media. Alaska was hit by a 9.2 magnitude earthquake in March of 1964, the strongest ever recorded in North America, leading to the deaths of 250 people. The EUSGS said the quake, which struck at 10:15 p.m. local time, was at a depth of 29 miles. 8 aftershocks were recorded within 90 minutes of the earthquake, the largest with a magnitude of 6.2, according to the body. Videos posted on social media by journalists and residents in Kodiak showed people evacuating their homes and driving away from the coast or walking in groups to higher ground as warning sirens could be heard. Resident Joseph Pina, a Filipino working in the area on a summer job, said, "This is the scariest thing that's happened to me while I've been living here." The U.S. government issued a tsunami warning for Alaska's southeast, while authorities in Hawaii also issued a tsunami watch, but later canceled the warning. Hazardous tsunami waves for this earthquake are possible within the next 3 hours along coast, the U.S. Tsunami Warning System said in a statement. Sorry. Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy tweeted the state's Emergency Operations Center had been activated and authorities were contacting communities in the tsunami warning areas. An emergency alert sent to people's homes read, "The National Weather Service has issued a tsunami warning." I apologize again. You ever do that?
All the time. I get a brain clink in there, and
A series of powerful waves and strong currents may impact coasts near you. You are in danger. Get away from coastal waters, move to high ground or inland now. Keep away from the coast until local officials say that it is safe to return. And the article goes on with a lot of reactions on Twitter. And the things that went on the social media. It's amazing how that. I apologize. I'm having a big time with my.
Brother Bernie is ready to take over at any point. Look at him. He's writing down furiously.
Oh, yeah. I see that. He's
like, Brother Joe, hurry up and shut up so I can get going.
No, that's okay.
He is just chomping at the bit. Now, this happened in Alaska, off the Aleutian Islands chain. And there was a tsunami warning that was given to Guam and the American Samoas, as well as to Hawaii. Now, there wasn't any given to Japan, although there could have been. And the reason is because that this is, Alaska is part of a seismically active Pacific Ring of Fire.
Not Johnny Cash's either.
Sorry?
Not Johnny Cash's either, right?
Right. The 9.2 that occurred in March 1964 was the strongest that was ever recorded in North America. It devastated Anchorage, and it unleashed a tsunami that slammed the Gulf of Alaska, the West Coast, U.S. West Coast, and Hawaii. And more than 250 people were killed by the quake and the tsunami. I remember seeing news reports about that.
A tsunami? Oh, yeah. I think everybody did.
So Alaska
And when
is
you're-
located on what's called the Pacific Ring of Fire. And Jamie, can you bring that up for us, please? We have a picture just to show you what this looks like.
What were you saying, Brother John?
Hey, Brother John?
Yes.
Okay, what was you saying?
I was going to say, when you're on an island, a tsunami warning, it's great to know, but there's just not a lot of things you can do. They're
Yeah.
basically saying, okay, you're probably about to die. Here's how it is. Here's how you're going to die.
That's about right. Now, Earth's so-called ring of fire, and we have a picture up on the screen for those of you that are looking at the video, and I will describe it, try to describe it anyway, for those of you listening via the radio station IMBR. Earth's so-called ring of fire is a horseshoe-shaped geological disaster zone. That's a hotbed for tectonic and volcanic activity. Roughly 90% of the world's earthquakes occur in the belt, which is also home to more than 450 volcanoes. Now, if you look up on, for those of you who are on video and you can see that, you can see the red horseshoe type that is up there, and it stretches, well, I'll get to that in a minute. The seismic region stretches along the Pacific Ocean coastlines, where the Pacific plate grinds against other plates that forms the Earth's crust. So it loops from New Zealand. It bypasses, it goes around Australia and goes up to Indonesia, completely taking in Indonesia, and right straight north on the coastline, taking in all of Japan, many parts of Asia, and then it stretches across the top of the Pacific Ocean over to Alaska. And then it runs all the way down the coastline of the United States and contains all of Central America and runs down the, let's see, that's on the west side of South America, all the way down
Along
through
Chile and
Chile.
Paraguay
Yes.
and all that, all the way down to the tip.
So it passes through the coasts of Asia and the Americas on the way. So that is just a, and in fact, in total, the loop makes a 25,000 mile long zone. Now that's, for those of you who are accustomed to kilometers, it is 40,000 kilometers. This zone is prone to frequent earthquakes and eruptions. The region is susceptible to disasters because it's home to a vast number of subduction zones. In other words, that's areas where the tectonic plates overlap, such as you would, if you put one hand over the other, that's how those plates would be functioning. And earthquakes are triggered when these plates scrape or slide underneath one another. And when that happens at sea, it can spawn tsunamis. So it's really a wonder why that there wasn't a devastating tsunami that take place from this, but praise the Lord that there wasn't. I've got a little bit of stats here that I'd like to share with you. The scripture that I read that said concerning earthquakes and divers, the word divers in the King James means different places. And we are literally seeing earthquakes around the world. I pulled some stats this afternoon as I was preparing for this from a website from the organization called earthquaketrack.com. And as of 1400, and for those of you who not accustomed to 24-hour time or military time, that's 2 o'clock p.m. today, July 30th, 2021, with a magnitude of 1.5 or greater. As of 2 o'clock this afternoon, there were 190 earthquakes in the last 24 hours. Now, this is worldwide. There were 1,115 earthquakes in the last 7 days. 5,414 earthquakes in the last 30 days. And 58,062 in the last 365 days. Now, earlier, Jamie and I were talking before we went on air, quite a while before we went on air, and he was throwing some questions out. He likes to play devil's advocate sometimes, and that's fine. But some very interesting questions were raised, and we talked about it. We discussed those questions. One of the questions was, what is this in comparison to? Well, now what you said, Jamie?
Yes, what compared to, I mean, this is a staggering amount of earthquakes, greater 1.5 magnitude and greater. That's a staggering amount, but what is it compared to 50 years ago? I mean,
right.
We're looking at, that's a lot of earthquakes, but is it comparable to 50 years ago? Is it comparable to 20 years ago?
Okay.
That's my question.
I have, and after we talked about that, I think this is what I was using when you and I were discussing this. What about he said, what about the last 20 years? Well, good viewpoint. And I pulled up another.
Was this just in America?
No.
This is globally.
Globally.
Oh, globally.
Globally.
And that doesn't count Pompeii way back, does it?
No.
Okay.
But one
See,
point.
he's not listening. I keep telling him.
I'm just talking. See, you're not listening because it has to do with what happened with Pompeii and the earthquake that happened in there. So I'm just kind of looking, seeing what's going on. Things are building.
But John
up.
heard me. He wasn't listening.
The volcano, Vesuvius.
Yeah, Mount Vesuvius. Yes.
Well, I let's see. I don't.
And that's the reason why they keep me around, to keep Brother Bernie. It's herding cats here. Herding cats.
Actually, he keeps all of us on our toes, to be honest about it.
Well, you know why I've got the green mic, because I can't make the scene if I don't have the green. Go ahead, brother.
Before I was so rudely interrupted, I did pull a chart. This is Statista.
And now he's forgot.
No, I'm just looking to see what the website were. It is statista.com, statistics. Development of the number of earthquakes worldwide since 2000. And so I'm looking at a period from 2000 to 2020, last year. All right. And this was actually published today. It came out today. And I didn't notice that till just now. It's dated July the 30th, 2021. In 2020, a total of 1,433 earthquakes with a magnitude of 5 or more were recorded worldwide. He looks at earthquakes detection. While the technology used to find the source of and record earthquakes has improved since the 20th century, the ability of scientists to predict earthquakes is still severely limited. As earthquakes happen numerous times every day, the issue for policymakers and city planners isn't if an earthquake will occur, but how powerful it will be. Now, I have a chart here, and I'm not sure whether Jamie is able to zoom in on that chart or not. That better? Okay. I'll see if I can straighten it up. All right. This chart shows that in the number of earthquakes went up until 2011. That tall, the tall one on the chart there is 2011. And then they started going, they dropped. In 2011, there was a total of 2,481 earthquakes, and we're talking about magnitude of 5 plus. Then it dropped in 2012 to 1,523. And the highest that it got up was, looks like 1,808. And then in 2019, it was only 1,637. And 2020, my printer cut off the edge of it. So it actually went down. So in comparison to what we're looking at now, is, what would you say the figures were? That, all right, let me go back and look at them.
It was a lot.
So it is, well, this was a total that I gave of 1.5. But this article is looking at 5 plus. So it would drop. So I would say that in comparison of what we're seeing now, currently, is probably less than what, or at least the 5 plus is probably less than what we've seen since 2011.
And that brought up my second question.
Yes. What was your second question? I don't remember. I didn't write them down.
When we use that verse that you mentioned in Matthew about earthquakes and plagues and pestilence and all those things in diverse places, stuff like that. A lot of that is used to how did we word that? Fear mongering.
Fear mongering,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
By God's people. A lot of pastors and preachers use that. I mean, and we've been talking about COVID for over a year now,
Right.
on this program. And one of the things that we were discussing today was, when we started talking about this earthquake and the number of earthquakes that we have globally this year, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't biting into that fear mongering that a lot of God's people seem to do. Oh, the Lord's coming back, or we're in the end times. And like I stated to you, we are in the end times. We need to have that mentality that we're in the end times. Paul even
Yes.
stated he was in the end times.
That's right.
We need to have that mentality. But Paul's reasoning for that was not fear. His reasoning for that was we need to be working because we don't have much more time.
That's right.
We need to be working to get as much done and to be as useful for God and serve God as much as we possibly can before he comes back. And unfortunately, and when we were talking, unfortunately, we see too much on social media of extremely smart, intelligent people who claim to be God's people buying into that fear-mongering of God's coming back and, oh, woe is me.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at it as God's, now we need to serve God. We need to be on fire doing what God wants us to be doing.
Well, here's the also another thing about it, Jamie, and that verse has let's see, two other major things besides just earthquakes, and nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. All right, we know that's all going on, very, very much so. And then it talks about famines. Well, that's taking place also, and pestilences and earthquakes. Now, the structure of this verse, I think many times we use earthquakes and we limit earthquakes in different places, but that's not the way this verse is structured. If I'm right in reading the structure of this grammatically, what it is saying is pestilence or famines, pestilence, earthquakes, all three in different places. And this indicates the entire world. Mm-hmm. So all three of these, it's not just earthquakes. Earthquakes is probably the biggest. But all three of these are major catastrophes when they take place. And we've had earthquakes all down through history. And we probably are seeing more of the earthquakes today than even less than 10 years ago, because of the sensitivity of instruments that are made and designed to pick up seismic waves. They can pick up these seismic monitors. These machines can pick up an earthquake hundreds of miles away, even if it's a 1.0 magnitude. Now, that's impossible, well, not likely, for a human to feel it.
Yeah.
It has to be about a 3 plus
Yes.
for humans to be able to feel it. Some people who are very sensitive might feel one that is a 2.5, and you might have animals react to it. But for the most part, they go unseen. So and I think I've said before, I have an app on my phone that shows me in the last 24 hours earthquakes that have taken place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's from actually below a point magnitude,
Yes.
all the way up. And there are hundreds.
Exactly.
And it goes on 24 hours a
Yes.
day, 7 days a week, 365.
It's interesting that I was thinking how the chart shows a building and then it's kind of a loosening